the Women's Creative dares their listeners to hurdle their dreams. Tune in to our weekly podcast to hear from individuals who are breaking down barriers, solving problems, and making the world a better place. Hear the stories of these business owners who chose to take the road less traveled. Join us for Not There Yet. Hey everyone, and welcome to Not There Yet. We are so excited to be launching the Women's Creative's first ever podcast. Huge thank you to Shock City Studios for hosting us, for editing, for guiding us through this new process and making it so easy for us. And also their incredible studio because it's very legit.
We can't wait for you to see some of our video podcasts because this is official.
It really is.
We've made it.
We've arrived. We have a podcast in a studio. So I'm Christina. I'm one of the co-founders of the Women's Creative, and I'm really excited to be kicking this off. Lindsay's here with me.
Hi, I'm Lindsay Skrdensky, and I'm the Director of Community Care for the Women's Creative.
Yeah, and so when we've been talking about doing a podcast forever. The concept has changed a few times, and we ended up landing on this idea of telling stories of people who have gone their own way, gone a little bit differently, maybe done something remarkable, or been in an industry where they have made strides that women have never really been in that space before. And so we're feeling really inspired, and we're really excited to share some of these stories.
We're so inspired for you to hear our first guest. We are kicking this off with an amazing lineup of guests, but this first one is amazing.
I know, we kind of did this and then we were like, oh, where do we go from here?
What's the road for us?
I know. Okay, so like a little bit of a drum roll. It is Maxine Clark, who will be sharing her story with you. And she's really, we've all heard her speak before and have been inspired by her. It was amazing to have the opportunity to get to personally interview her and kind of ask some direct questions.
So in this next piece, you're going to hear Christina has a very intentional, candid conversation with Maxine. And as a listener, it was so fun to sit through that. So when you think of Maxine Clark, she's the founder of Build-A-Bear and former CEO. She's also the queen of hugs. Did you ever know when she meets someone in person, she will, instead of shaking their hand, she'll give them a hug.
I love that. Well, and even what she said, because now we'll hear a lot about her current project, which is Del Mar Divine. And she just even expressed that as this is my heart for this is that it gives a hug to the neighborhood and a hug to the city. And I just think that her sense of care and interest in that kindness and spreading that love is so powerful and almost tactile. You could just feel her passion for what she's doing and how much she truly deeply loves individuals and our community.
I would say as much of a badass as she is, she's so intentional about those one-on-one relationships. She thrives and believes in the importance of mentoring, and she's constantly mentoring dozens of people. And she's just a true inspiration and a champion for St. Louis and people and women in general.
Yeah, I think that was the first thing I told her is I had never met her before this podcast, but I feel very much mentored by her just from having listened to her before and being inspired by her. So we kind of mentioned her interest in care, but after we both laughed, we cried. We hope that you do too. Lindsay, what is one big takeaway you took from her conversation?
So one big takeaway for me was when she talked about the Del Mar Divine project, kind of thinking about getting this started, she went to a friend of hers and asked them to spearhead it, and they didn't have the capacity to do so. And they said, Maxine, why don't you do it? And she said, okay. And she did it. And now she has started Del Mar Divine, which is going to significantly change the landscape of that neighborhood, but St. Louis in general. So for me, it was the power of saying yes and just running with it. And we all have that power.
Yeah, I agree. And I was so struck by the fact that she is willing to take on a project in an industry, and she's kind of done this a couple times, that she's only somewhat familiar with, or maybe not familiar at all, and really have no idea when she got started what it was necessarily going to take to see it through. But she called in the community, the resources, the partners to get it done right, and to really see the project through, even though it hit crazy roadblocks.
And she has a recent one now with flooding.
I know. It's
and
crazy.
she's still spearheading. I think we all have a little bit of Maxine inside of us. Some of us let it shine further. And I think what I hope our listeners take from your conversation with Maxine is to let that inner Maxine inspire us and let it inspire your journey.
Yeah, I love that. I love that she was fearless in her care for others, fearless in her interest in seeing her vision happen, and kind of like fearless in the size of her dreams. And she talks about that. Like, she's just like, no, go bigger and get there.
And the bigger's never big enough. Like, you can keep going. You can keep doing. And that's, again, the true kind of what we're honoring with this podcast is you're not there yet. And it's not, our guests are all, they're talented, they're magical, they're doing big things, but they all realize there's still more to do.
Yeah.
And that's the epitome of Maxine.
Yeah, it's incredible. So there really was no one better who could have kicked this off. Nope. I think we are all going to walk away from this wanting to listen to it multiple times, taking notes. And we hope that this little bit that we shared with you kind of sets the tone for what you're about to hear. So enjoy, Maxine. Thank you for being here. For those of you who don't know, the Women's Creative is an organization that supports women business owners. We want to see them go farther and go bigger. And so we do 3 really exciting things. We've got a membership program that's just phenomenal. You can find out more about it on our website. We do a variety of events. Stacy and our events team are constantly blowing our minds with really great vendor and experiential markets in St. Louis. And then we also have a little retail store at City Foundry, not so little.
30 women-owned businesses in there.
Yes, it's phenomenal.
Huge.
So if you haven't come to see us at City Foundry for the Procure Shop, please do. Don't miss it. And thank you so much for being here. This is Not There Yet, stories of women who have taken the road less traveled. And please enjoy our time with Maxine Clark, because we really did.
The Women's Creative couldn't be more excited to record our weekly podcast at Shock City Studios. Their large format studio specializes in music, podcasts, and audiobooks. If you're looking for a space for you, call Shock City Studios.
Maxine, it's such a pleasure to get to kind of chat with you for a few minutes. I have seen you speak before in front of a couple different groups and have always felt so inspired both by your story and your heart and your very clear passion for what you do, which is exciting. We get to work with, a lot of the women we work with are similarly motivated by purpose and kind of their why. And so it's just really special to see someone who is in a leadership position like you. I think we all see you as a mentor of all of us because you're so willing to share.
I love that. Thank you. That's an honor. I appreciate that honor.
Absolutely. And then just a side note, I was kind of reading a little bit about your story, and it looks like were you born or raised in Florida?
Yeah, in Miami.
Okay. I am also a Florida native.
Where are you from in Miami, in Florida?
I'm from Tampa, from the West Coast, but addicted to the sun nonetheless.
Yeah. I'm not so addicted to the sun, but I had a wonderful growing up in the 50s and 60s. And it was just a great environment, after the war for families to grow and prosper. And lucky me, I grew up there, Coral Gables, Florida. Couldn't be better.
Yes. So how did you, obviously you kind of started your own company, what ended up growing and being like a really phenomenal and different retail concept. Did some of that come out of your childhood experience or other people that you saw? What gave you the courage or kind of the willingness to step out and do something really different?
That's a good question, because I think that, as we're growing up in life, we don't know what moments in time are going to be the most influential. So I cannot point to any one specific thing, because I went to college and I was intending to be a civil rights attorney. But that basics, my mother was a very active person in civil rights, and also founded a school for children with Down syndrome. And in the time when it was not called Down syndrome and kids were mostly institutionalized and had a short lifespan, she and women all across the country changed the way families and society welcomes children with Down syndrome into their everyday life. So I was always with people who took a risk. It might not have seemed like a risk because, somebody's helping somebody, but it is a risk because not everybody gets it. And so my mother was definitely a risk taker. My parents didn't go to college. They worked my father learned his trade in the military. They were able to benefit from the government's GI Bill and bought a house in a neighborhood that was a subdivision that became one of the most wealthiest neighborhoods in the country. And not that my father benefited all that much from it, but but we lived there and we went to school there, and he sold the house for a profit, not what it would sell for today. But, all those impossible things were happening all around me, and there was no reason for me to think I couldn't do impossible things. So it wasn't, and I loved going on, one thing that we did in school in the good old days was go on field trips. And some of them we just walked because there was a bakery that wasn't far away. We got on a bus to go to the dairy, and I was always curious about how things were made, how bread was baked or how cows were milked, or, so I had a curious mind, and that was encouraged by those field trips. And when I ultimately had the idea for Build-A-Bear, many years after working in the retail business, it made sense to me that kids would want to go to a field trip in their neighborhood with their parents to make their own stuffed animal. It was like, duh, why wouldn't they want to do that? So I would have wanted to do it. And I think sometimes we forget our kid think. As we grow up, we forget what we would like to do as children. And so I still always had a kid brain.
I have heard you say that before, and I think it's one of the most powerful and honestly challenging to me. I think adults get so weighed down sometimes by responsibilities that lightness and that joy and the curiosity often, gets kind of pushed to the wayside. And so I love, it's obvious that you kind of came from a legacy of care and concern and awareness and advocacy, and then, stayed connected to that. You've got your Del Mar Divine background. Your work has gone from retail and Build-A-Bear to a phenomenal project in St. Louis that I think we're all so excited about, and really honored that you would take the time to spearhead it for our community. So would you share a little bit more about just kind of the purpose behind the work that you're doing now and how that motivates you?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that, one of the things that, when it gets down to what did I learn in my family, I think one of the things was civic engagement. My mother took me with her to register voters, to listen to, different community issues that were going on. My mother, to make posters, to march on Washington, all kinds of things. So I just thought that was the way everybody lived. I didn't know that children didn't, do all those things. And my friends would come along and help too. And our neighborhood kids would all color posters and things like that. So to me, that was what we were supposed to do. And actually, that's very similar to all the work that I've ever done. It is about delivering to the customer an experience that they would be willing to pay for. And, so sometimes people can't afford to pay. How can you, though, create experiences of which everything that they do wows them? So the other day I was walking in our apartments because they were having a lot of people moving in now. And a lady stopped me and she said, "Are you Maxine?" And I said, "Yes, I am." And she said, "Can I hug you?" And I said, "Yes, you can hug me." And about 15% of our apartments are low income apartments. They're just random. They're no different than any other apartment. It just is wherever the people pick to live. And then when 15% of them are rented, then that's how it makes us stop. Because this is a mixed income building. And she said, I've never lived anywhere like this. She said, I've never had a dishwasher. I've never had a disposal. I've never had a microwave. And I've never, ever had a washer dryer. I had to go to the laundromat. She says, I'm never leaving. Thank you. And I know that's it. Nobody else has to say anything to me. That was it. That was the purpose, was to bring people to live and work together from all kinds of walks of life. Although our offices are all nonprofits, the purpose is to make people more productive, to give them the tools, the space, the connections that they need to live the best life they want to live. And that they can see beyond their everyday experience and meet new people. And that is like a teddy bear hug. So I did that, and we sold well over 200 million stuffed animals to date. This is our 25th anniversary, and I'm still very connected to Build-A-Bear, but it's the same thing. It's really no different. So we're just hugging a neighborhood in a different way. Adults still need teddy bears, but this is really, what we all should be doing. It's not sainthood or anything like that. It is joy. I just came in from a meeting in another neighborhood, and I walked in. I said, I was thinking, Mr. Rogers, It's a Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood to myself. I was humming along, and the lady was walking across the street. She says, "What are you singing?" And I said, "It's a beautiful day in the neighborhood." She, "Oh yeah, it is. What were you singing?" I said, "I was singing It Was a Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood." She just laughed, and I said, "It's just joyful to come to work here every day and to know that I played a small part in making it happen, and that there's other people joining with me in the joy." It's just I can't even explain it, because I think it's a drug. Joy is a drug. And the more joyful that you are, the more joy you can create. So, for me, it's what I was meant to do. And it's what I've always done. So although I used to be paid for it, now I'm volunteering and putting my own money into this project. So this is something for everybody. There is so much work to be done in communities like St. Louis, but particularly here in St. Louis. And we just have to do it together. And it's one person at a time making a connection for another person, just like you're doing in your work. We can't do it enough, and we can't stop.
Yeah. I think that idea of it being addictive is like so powerful. I have always found that, I often feel kind of the same way when you are giving into community, or you're pushing into building community, it almost feels like you're being gifted more than you're gifting. I mean,
I feel that way.
You're really like the amount of joy and just like passion that is when it starts to snowball like that, and you see it in a community. I think it's an incredible thing. I think it's phenomenal that what you are doing is now coming to fruition. It's now like physically existing in a building. What was some of the motivation or thought behind, because this could have been a digital community that you built. It could have been something small on a corner. But instead you really are working in a neighborhood. You did something on a really big scale. Why the size, why the scale, why the mixed use of the space itself?
Well, I also love history. And when I moved to St. Louis in 1976, I lived in Lafayette Square. And I loved the old buildings. I loved growing up in Miami. Everything was what I thought modern, So I came here. Everything was historic, but a lot of it was falling down. And so I just got immersed kind of in the history. Always loved history as a student, American history. So I started doing research. And people would say to me, "Why do you live in the city? Like, aren't you afraid?" And I'd say, "No, I'm not." And so I got very comfortable with history. And one of the things I was working on after I retired from Build-A-Bear was our KIPP public charter schools. And I was the board chair at the time. And we were opening our second school, an elementary school, over in this neighborhood in the 63112 zip code. And I was really friendly with the neighbors. The neighbors were so excited we were opening a school in a building that had been closed for like 10 years. And one of the neighbors, Rodney and Juanita Norman, were really friendly to me. And they said, "Oh, why don't you drive around and see look at the neighborhood. It's really a beautiful neighborhood." And so one day, instead of turning left and going towards my home, I turned right and I went around the block, and I ended up seeing that this building was for sale. They were just nailing in the big for sale sign. And I thought, what was this? I didn't even know. I passed it probably 20 times, but I never thought about it. And when I called my friend Dennis Lauer on the phone, and I said, "Dennis, why doesn't Cortex buy this and make it into a Cortex West and make it for nonprofits?" And he said, "Oh, we have too much work and we're so busy. We have so much land. Why don't you do it?" And I thought, well, yeah, why don't I do it? I did not know how big it was. I didn't know how old it was. I didn't know anything about it, really. But I found out that it was about 500,000 square feet of space. It was about half of a mall. It was a hospital. It was doctors' offices, and it had been virtually abandoned for the better part of 10 years at that point. But there were people still operating in it, and it was still a healthcare. It had always been a place of caring, but it had been slowed down pretty dramatically from its early St. Luke's history. So we bought the land and we started working on the plan. And I always wanted to create a place for teachers to live, because even in St. Louis, as affordable as we think our housing is, teachers in Missouri make the lowest of any teachers in the country. And in St. Louis City, they make one of the lowest of the low. So I thought we could make the housing for teachers and people, young professionals, social workers, nurses, people that were just starting out in the caring business and could need a great place to live. So it was big enough that we could divide it and make the old hospital into the apartments. And then we could make the doctor's offices into office space. And then the main floor, which is of the original 1904 hospital, could be the connecting point. So the public spaces that we could share. So we have a fitness center that we share. Everything's kind of shared, but not 100% because you have security issues. So we laid out a plan, and my partners were Clayco, and they helped us design and put this together. I don't think anybody knew how hard it would be or how expensive it would be. We just kept trugging along. And then, of course, came COVID, which made it more expensive and more difficult because of supply chain. But we're here. We moved in December and into the office, and the apartments were being finished, and they started moving in August, early August, and almost all the space is done, except we had a flood. And then we had to tear out the floors and in the first floor and, do some work, which we're working on. But we'll be fully operational by October 1st, for sure. It was delayed a couple months because of the flood, but we'll be fine.
Yeah. So you clearly have built and successfully executed from the ground so many different things, from all of this time trying new projects and seeing what works and powering through when things get really hard. Because obviously Delmar Divine is, and I'm sure Build-A-Bear and everything else you've worked on has not been without its struggle. Thinking through all of that, what are one or two or three things that you would say got you where you are today, got you to that place of being able to power through and really see things through?
Well, one thing, it's never really been about me. It's really been about what you're building. What legacy do you want to leave? And for me, Build-A-Bear was sort of a natural thing because I'd been in the retail business for 20 years working for the main department stores. I had a wonderful career. I was the president of Payless Shoe Source, which was the largest shoe company in America at that time. And, I say you can never have too many shoes or too many teddy bears. And now teddy bears have shoes. So it's the perfect, meeting of the minds. And then when you have the success that I had, what do you do with it? I mean, I'm not a golfer. I've been everywhere I wanted to be. I want to give back to the people that made me successful. And that was children and families for the most part. And so how do we do that? And so it's not about really much of a question. It's just really we're motivated by different things. All of us come from different backgrounds. Some people have more wherewithal financially or some more ideas or more questions. And we have to all work together to bring those questions and answers and hopefully the money that it takes to do it. Some things are, much harder. This is a huge project. I could not have done this without just the square footage, but I could not have done this myself. I did not have enough financial wherewithal. So we had to really design a capital stack that would work so that we could get it done. So we could prove that it could be done so other people would do it. And because there's lots of wonderful places for this in a smaller scale or even the same scale to happen. And we don't get to those buildings soon. It's going to be really expensive to do them. So we were lucky. We got this building, pretty soon after it was completely empty, but it was still a lot of work. And that was 7 years ago that we purchased it. So that's how long it took to build up all of the tools to do this, from historic tax credits and new market tax credits and donors and a mortgage and all that. It's the plans, redoing the plans, because once you get in, you see that, 10 buildings built from 1904 to 1965 were all different codes. There were hospital rooms that were really teeny, that had more columns than you thought, all kinds of things. But with the right partners, it is about people. It's about the community, the neighborhood that cares about this project. It's about the bringing together the right partners to get it done. I could not have done it without Clayco. Clayco is a one-stop shop. They have a design firm, they have an architectural firm, they have all kinds of things. And Bob Clark is a person who cares about the community. I think if either of us knew how hard this would be, we might not have done it. So I'm glad I didn't know. And I think when he looks back on this, I think he'll be glad that he didn't know, because it'll be something, I know it's already something that he's proud of too. And not that it was his vision, but he helped me bring this vision and his input and others' input to reality. Mostly our neighbors. Our neighbors took active role in this project. Not so much, well, many of them also worked here because they're construction workers or they're people that work, but they told me what they thought and they gave me their opinions, and they're still doing that every day. And I love it. I love that they care. And I think that now I can eventually turn it over to them to be operating and to, somebody who knows, I'm not thinking that far ahead, but it's just a gift. I mean, I can't even say that enough, that when you do something for somebody else, it gives you back 100 times over. And since this is such a large scale project, but today I was just where I was earlier. We were talking about Build-A-Bear, and somebody asked me a question. She said, I've never been, so I carry in my purse gift cards that I can give, to give that hug, like to say, well, now you can go. And she went like, it was like I gave her a new car, she was so excited. So there's like, it's so little, it takes so little to bring joy. And some projects are bigger than others, but I didn't have to build it.
Yeah.
Somebody else did all the hard physical work. I got to have the vision work, and I love it. I love absolutely feel. People say, which was more. People ask me, which was more fulfilling, Build-A-Bear or this? There's no choice. I don't have to make a choice. One was one part of my life. It was very good, and it's continuing to do great things and under a wonderful leader. And I get to do this, and I hope that I'll be able to make sure that this is in good hands in the future also, so that it can grow and prosper.
Well, this is phenomenal. I feel like you every time I know I said this before, but every time I've ever sat and heard you share anything of your story, I feel like I walk away more joyful and more inspired. And so know that like your gift that you're receiving is being passed on. And so a lot of the women who are going to be listening are people who are lifting projects or stepping into businesses that they don't know where it's going to go or how hard it might be. And they're not, none of us are really sure what's ahead. We just take that next step. And so as we're kind of wrapping this up, is there one thing you would leave with women in particular, women business owners or project leaders that you feel like you would really want to hand them as inspiration or encouragement?
Yes, I think that everybody should dream the dream supreme, their version of the dream supreme. Don't put together the biggest business plan you can think of. And every single thing, if money weren't an object, what would you want in it? Don't restrict your brain from thinking of what's possible, because there's lots of people that's going to cut it down anyway. But just think of everything and write it down and put it in the business plan. It doesn't mean you have to afford it yet, but it's where you want to take it. And then figure out how to do that incredible, expensive Rolls-Royce plan on a Ford budget, because you can do it. You have to start somewhere. You can dream big and start small. And that's really what I did. One store, Build-A-Bear, that became 4 stores, it became 10 stores, it became eventually hundreds of stores. And that was in my plan. In fact, I wrote down that our 100th store was going to be at Roosevelt Field in New York, and it was going to be during the 100th anniversary of the teddy bear, which was 1902. So it was 2002, and it happened. We actually were able to make that happen. That's how specific we were. But it always is a changing, flexible plan. So it doesn't, you're doing it in a Word, in your computer, you can change it and you can update it. But if you don't have a vision, it's hard to explain it to somebody else. And why, so you have to make sure that you're convinced that this is what you want to do, because there will be disappointments, there will be setbacks, there will be things that, like I said earlier, if you knew then what you know now, you might not have done it. So you don't want to know everything, because you can take one step at a time and get to where you want to go, and maybe get to where you even further than you thought you would go. But you have to have that vision, and don't let anybody talk you out of that while you're writing it. They can talk you out of pieces of it or tell you to move it from this year to that year, but go for the big dream. And I say, dream the dream supreme, and it will, at least it'll be likely to happen. So if you're way up here, you might get to here. But if you're way down here, you're in the middle dream, you're not the dream supreme, you won't get where you really are capable of going. And I think we underestimate ourselves, that especially women, because we have so many lives and roles and things to do. We think, I can't do that now. I can't do this. Well, write it down while you're thinking about it, because you may not be able to do it now, but you can start on it in 3 years when your kids go to school. And then people say, well, somebody else did something like that, I'm not going to do that anymore. They don't have what's in your heart or your brain. They only have what's in their brain and their heart. You could make it better, because Ray Kroc didn't invent hamburgers and Howard Schultz didn't invent coffee, and I didn't invent teddy bears. But you can invent how to do something that you see every day in your life better. And that's what our job. That's what our job is as living, breathing human beings. And women see so many things, because we're mothers, we're sisters, we're wives, we're daughters. We all those roles, we see things that are missing that we could make better, and we just choose not to do it. But we could do it. We just have to have a plan. So have a plan. Dream the dream supreme.
Okay, well, we're out. We have to go make the world better. So I think you should just do it.
Go for it. Go for the dream.
That's right. I'm motivated. I'm ready. Maxine, this is absolutely phenomenal. I can't tell you how grateful we are for your time, for everything you're doing for our community, the leader that you are for other women, all the things. And so I'm really, really grateful that you led out on this with us. And I think this is going to be an inspiration to so many people. I know it definitely has been for
thank you.
So thank you.